music industry is an extremely fickle business. Audiences and the media build you up one day and then forget about you and move on to the next big thing the next day. Either through success or sheer dumb luck, some bands are fortunate enough to maintain their success and sustain a long-term career, whereas others aren't so fortunate and are relegated to mere footnotes of music history. And in this video, we're going to be looking at these very such bands. So I've compiled a list of 20 of the best examples I can think of metal/alternative bands who were pretty big artists in their day, but are now, unfortunately, almost completely forgotten about. Let's bloody do this! My fellow cringe millennials, you also probably remember that time when Steel Panther were fucking everywhere. No matter how much you wanted to hate those goofy goobers, there was just something weirdly charming and lovable about them. The songs were incredibly inappropriate and offensive, the humour was crass and on the nose, but they did it with such conviction and bravado that it was somehow fine and just really fun. Not to mention, the compositions were ridiculously well put together. Both Michael Starr's vocals and Satchel's guitar playing were legitimately amazing. However, the joke did eventually get old and the band failed to keep things exciting, and now their popularity is massively diminished compared to what it used to be, and I never hear anyone talking about them anymore.
Baby, gravy, all over your face, yeah.
The brainchild of genius and mad scientist Devin Townsend, Strappy Young Lad is legitimately some of the most unhinged, psychotic music ever put to record. And I'm not just saying that to try and hype the band up. Some of the songs on City and Alien especially are just so incredibly dense. They sound like the recordings are just gonna like collapse in on themselves at any moment. It's often the case that a lot of heavy music ends up losing its intensity over time as audiences' tastes change and trends change. But SYL are one of those rare exceptions, and honestly, this music is still absolutely batshit crazy, even to this day. Velvet Revolver was basically Guns N' Roses with a different rhythm guitarist and singer, I think. So as such, they were never really taken that seriously. And I always thought this was such a shame because this band was so fucking good. Honestly, in terms of just straight up raw rock and roll, hard rock, whatever, it doesn't get much better than Velvet Revolver. Especially the first album, Contraband, I think it was called. Slash's guitar playing is absolutely unreal here. Like, seriously fucking good stuff. Every song is incredibly well written, very memorable, and driven by Scott Weiland's very, very colourful vocals. I would love to see this band reunited with Miles Kennedy singing for them or something. That would be so sick. Natural successors to Judas Priest, as far as I'm concerned, 3 Inches of Blood somehow managed to make traditional battle jacket metal popular in a time when metalcore was taking over the world. They play an extremely strange mix of Painkiller era Judas Priest mixed with harsh vocals, with like a power metal aesthetic and vibe. It's super fucking corny, and on paper it really should not work, but the songs are just so incredibly well written. They're impossible not to like. They were actually a pretty huge band for a while, and it was looking like they were gonna go all the way. But for whatever reason, they ended up quickly falling into obscurity, and now I never hear anybody talking about them. The most criminally underlooked metal bands of all time, Sikth somehow single-handedly invented that whole kind of mathy, genty sound that like now everybody copies. Yet it seems basically no one's heard of them. Misha from Periphery has said on several occasions that Sikth were massively influential on him and were instrumental in shaping their band's sound. So if you like incredibly spazzy, psychotic math/prog metal, then I guarantee Sikth are your new favourite band. Similarly to Testament and Exodus, Annihilator did enjoy some success in the 80s, and Jeff Waters is held in very high regard as an iconic metal guitarist, but they always struggled with lineup issues and never quite managed to maintain that momentum. They had a brief resurgence in the 2000s thanks to that Roadrunner United project, if any of you remember that, but unfortunately Annihilator have since just been slipping more and more into obscurity. But I'll always love their incredibly quirky and erratic take on the genre, and Jeff Waters' solos are always absolutely scrumptious to listen to.
Your mind begins to fold. Aren't you growing cold? I feel no pain, but it's not the same. Something is just not right. Welcome, I invite you all to the other world. You'll have to face this house.
Still Remains were one of those classic Roadrunner metalcore bands of the 2000s that were being pushed super hard at the time. Their pretty unique mix of raw, epic, melodic metalcore was very infectious, with their songs being super well crafted and memorable. The addition of keyboards to their sound also made them really stand out compared to their peers, and at times almost made them sound like classic melodeath bands such as Amorphis and Dark Tranquillity. I have no bloody idea what ended up happening to this band, but yeah, I have not heard anything about them or heard them mentioned in a long time. Stone Sour is definitely one of the most extreme examples I can think of a band who went from being on top of the world to basically completely irrelevant and forgotten about in such a crazy short amount of time. Mostly known as Corey Taylor's other band, Stone Sour were basically a butt rock Slipknot light, which achieved massive success in the 2000s and early 2010s. To be honest, I didn't really like them at all back in the day, but revisiting them now, Honestly, I can say they were pretty sick, especially the heavier stuff. I've grown to really love Corey Taylor's voice, and it's super cool hearing it in a different context outside of Slipknot. However, Stone Sour eventually got put on the back burner with apparently no signs of ever coming back.
They told us that we wouldn't survive. They left us alone in the maelstrom, and she could tell her not afraid. I'm getting into breathing cells again. You're looking at an absolute zero. Good side, good side. Good side, good side. Good side, good side. Good side.
So if you thought that 2000s metalcore was all squeaky clean production and shredding, then you are wrong, sir. Bleeding Through took a wholly unique approach to the genre with super heavy, almost grindcore-like guitars, blast beats, and even some spooky gothic keyboards. I guess imagine Avenged Sevenfold's Waking the Fallen, but way heavier and a lot more rough around the edges. It sounds like everything they recorded was off the grid, which gives it this really cool, like chaotic hardcore feel. And none of the clean vocals have auto-tune on, which makes them sound, honestly, really horrible. But it actually adds to the vibe, and I love it. I think the band are still going in some capacity, but I never, ever hear anybody talking about them.
'Cause I remember the first time you died. Tonight I want to bleed along with us. This is glorious. Love, your love is outrageous. Now I rise from my knees. I will not live in misery.
So if it's not already apparent, I'm not particularly into bluesy styles of music, and as such, the 70s is not really a decade that I've ever been that passionate about. Like, as much as I respect that stuff, bands like Led Zeppelin are just really not for me. As far as bands of that era go, for me, Rainbow are the undisputed kings. There was just something so magical about those earlier albums that no other band really managed to capture. I'm also one of the probably 6 people on the planet who actually really like the more poppy Rainbow stuff too, especially the albums with Joe Lynn Turner, who is, in my opinion, one of the greatest rock singers of all time. Justice for Rainbow!
Beware of a place, a smile on a bright, shiny face. I'll never return. I'll die. Can't let you go, even though it's over. I just can't let you. Do you remember me? On the street of dreams, running through my.
Elliot Minor were an incredibly unique band who fused pop-punk/emo, I suppose, with classical music and incredibly sophisticated Beach Boys style vocal harmonies, which I can imagine is probably the last thing a lot of you want to be listening to. But honestly, these guys were really onto something special. For anyone who's into more, let's say, flowery, theatrical, grandiose music, such as Muse, My Chemical Romance, Queen even, I think you'll really dig these guys. Songs such as Parallel Worlds, The White One Is Evil, Jessica, these are legitimate Kerrang era classics, and it's a real shame that this band were just kind of like pushed aside in favor of their more, let's say, textbook peers. So people are often perplexed by Anthrax's place in the big four of thrash, as on the face of it, they don't really appear to have the same status that the other 3 bands do. But it's very easy to forget that the band were actually a massive deal in the 80s and the early 90s, with some very big singles and that super famous crossover with Public Enemy, was it? But unlike their peers, they just didn't quite manage to maintain the same level of relevancy. Even though they do still have a solid old school cult following, they've unfortunately been relegated to more of a footnote of history rather than continuing to be a major heavyweight contender in the modern metal scene. But that doesn't change the fact that they'll always have the sickest riffs and some of the meanest guitar tones in the business.
Welcome to your nightmare. Just can't walk away. Stop you to choose.
Along with Doomy Satyricon is really the only black metal band that managed to take the genre to the metal mainstream, which is a very impressive feat in itself. They started life as a pretty bog standard black metal outfit, but eventually pivoted to a more kind of black and roll sound. This took the core features of the genre, but cleaned everything up a bit and made all the songs more mid-tempo and stompy. This was a huge success and the band actually exploded, enjoying quite a few years of fleeting success in the metal mainstream. What happened after that though? I actually have no idea. I don't think I've heard anyone mention Satyricon in like 15 years probably. Still a fucking classic band though. Just when you're sure you've heard it all before, a band comes along and turns the whole genre on its head. Akercocke's unique brand of sharp-suited, tongue-in-cheek, satanic, extreme metal was a breath of fresh air, combining elements of traditional American death metal with electronic music, black metal, new wave punk, even world music. Their albums Choronzon and Words That Go Unspoken are essential listening for all extreme metal fans. Frustratingly, the band just seemed to dissipate just as they were on the precipice of exploding. Who knows where they would have been if they managed to continue that trajectory. The Sword were one of those bands that exploded thanks to the Guitar Hero franchise, with their song Freya appearing in the second installment. Their infectious, jammy style was impossible not to like. With all of the endless riffing and psychedelic imagery, you could shake a sword at. But honestly, I completely forgot this band existed until I was doing research for this video yesterday. I don't think I've thought about this band or heard anyone mention them for like 20 years probably. But going through all of their old songs earlier, I was reminded just how fucking sick this band were. So yes, if you like thrashy stoner metal, I suppose, and psychedelic imagery, then this is your band. So usually when one thinks of folk metal, one imagines gimmicky power metal bands in stupid LARPing outfits singing songs about drinking alcoholic beverages. But Ireland's Primordial are nothing of the sort. Blending Celtic themes with epic black metal, Primordial create truly moving art thanks to the dramatic, rousing vocals of their vocalist, Alan. Now, I'm emotionally retarded and it takes a lot for me to get emotionally moved by something, but man, I've got to admit, the first time I saw Primordial live, I was genuinely choking up. Oh, it was really, really captivating stuff. They still have a very strong cult following, but they're far from being in the spotlight these days. And unfortunately, it's really rare that I still hear people name drop them.
Where is the fighting man? Am I here? You wanna trade everything? I'm a heathen, searching for his soul. I will have his life for this, and I know.
I've got to admit that on paper, the prospect of progressive emo music sounds truly awful, but somehow the bloody legends in Coheed and Cambria managed to bloody pull it off. So I know that Coheed still have a very strong cult following, so I do apologise, but at the end of the day, Coheed just sort of ended up being one of those one album wonder artists, I guess. They absolutely exploded after releasing their third album, Good Apollo Volume 1, I think it's called. It has like a really long, weird name. But you guys probably remember the songs. There was like 3 massive singles that came off this album. The band were fucking everywhere. There was an absolute shit ton of hype around this band and they were like poised to be the next biggest thing. And then they just kind of fizzled out and what happened? I have no idea.
You stormed off to sky the Armada like Jesus played leader. I'll drill through your heart. Believer, you leaving the more. Like anything you do, as anyone you are. Listen well, will you marry me? You know well in the suffering. The most gracious of hosts, you may be.
Chimaira rose to prominence around the same time as bands like Trivium and Lamb of God, etc., but stood out from their peers for being significantly heavier. They had this real uncompromising sound that blended metalcore with death metal, groove metal, and even a little bit of nu metal. Even though they were a decent band and did enjoy a good amount of popularity, they were just very unlucky that they were around at the same time as, you know, heavy hitters like Avenged and Killswitch and Trivium, who were, you know, undeniably a cut above them. And as such, they weren't able to get their fair share of the pie. Even though they've been mostly forgotten about these days, I do feel like they're starting to have a little bit of a resurgence as people are starting to wake up to how severely underappreciated they were.
Determination, perseverance, resolution, resurrection.
So, most of you are probably aware of prog metal titans Haken, but I can hazard a guess that most of you have probably not heard of founding member Rich Henshaw's original band To-Mera, with a super unique sound that took that core Dream Theater vibe and mixed it with black metal, jazz, cinematic music, you name it. They garnered a lot of attention at the time and were positioned to do very well, especially in prog circles, before they just seemingly vanished off the face of the earth after their third album. The vocals are a little bit weird and maybe put a lot of people off them, but honestly, if you're into really, really amazing, over-the-top prog metal, you have to check out this band. Right, so if you're into classic metalcore and melodeath and you've never heard God Forbid before, you need to rectify that right now! They easily stand toe-to-toe with the likes of Trivium, Avenged, and Killswitch, with their fourth album, The Constitution of Treason, in my opinion, being one of the best melodic metal albums of all time. Insane riffs and grooves, sick, varied vocals, and some truly tasty solos. These guys have everything you want from this sort of band and more. They were super popular for quite some time and got a lot of attention in the media, but alas, like many other bands on this list, they were unable to follow through with their success and just, you know, I don't know what happened. This one was a real shame, to be honest. There we have it, guys, my picks for the top 20 bands that time forgot. What do you think? Please do let me know in the comments below. Do you agree with my picks? Disagree? What other bands would you have included on this list? Cheers, take care, and I'll see you again very soon.